All right, good evening, and thank you so much for investing your time with us, everyone. Yes, you're here at the right place. We're happy for you to take part in our 12th series of Dinner with Practice Heroes. And tonight, we're going to delve into a popular and yet uncomfortable topic. Bill Hills is joining the Practice Heroes tonight, which is Jackie Lauterbach and Ashley Brownfield, to talk about employee dishonesty, leaves clues, embezzlement in your dental practice. Hi again, my name is Maria Fortes, and I am the director of the Practice Heroes at CareStack. Our goal today is that you will come away with an understanding and knowledge and pearls of wisdom, if you will, that you can apply to be more successful in your business. So without further ado, I would like to introduce my co-panelists. Let's start off with Jackie Lauterbach.
Hi, everyone. Great to see everybody again. Thank you for joining us. My name is Jackie. Thank you, Maria. I've been in the dental industry for the past 9 or so years, working mostly in administrative roles, and I am the senior practice hero here with CareStack. I'm thrilled to be here as always, especially for such an intriguing and interesting topic. So thank you for having me. I'll pass it over to Ashley Brownfield.
Hi guys, I'm Ashley Brownfield. I'm a registered dental hygienist and a practice hero at CareStack. I've worked in the dental industry for around 16 years, and I know I've been in offices that have experienced this firsthand. So Bill, without further delay, we're all interested in this topic.
All right. Hi, everybody. My name is Bill Hiltz. Thank you, Ashley. Hope the audio and everything is okay. Well, yeah, I've added up all your years of experience, and I think I've probably got as many combined. I'm a little bit older, so yeah, I've been doing this for about 20 years. I've had multi-careers, but this one, embezzlement in dental practices, is one that I've been doing since about 2004. So tonight's presentation is employee dishonesty leaves clues, and there's really two parts to it. And the very first part is to talk about a typical case of dental embezzlement. Now, when you read in various magazines and articles about how dental embezzlement works, you'll often hear an approach that says it's hard to control. I just want to tell you that preventing dental embezzlement doesn't have to feel like this. And when someone says that you have to make your own deposits every day, it doesn't have to feel like this. So excuse me for one moment. So let's meet the presenter. That's me. That's the boring part. And then let's learn the clues of employee dishonesty and what you should look out for in your practice. And that's the nice part. So to start, some statistics. Dentistry is one of the most embezzled professions, and that's a fact. Now, you've probably heard things of 60% of dentists will be embezzled at least once during their career, and maybe half of those are embezzled more than once. The most recent study on this by the American Dental Association, I think, was around 2018 or 2019, where half of the respondents came back and said, yes, we have experienced embezzlement in our dental practice. Now, that means that they were aware of it. And there's a lot of it that goes unaware or disregarded, or the doctor may be willfully blind. They knew they were embezzled, but it's something that happened in the past, and they just want to put it behind them. Those things never get reported. Okay, so let's start out with a typical case of dental embezzlement. This is your generic bread and butter dental embezzlement case. And in every case of dental embezzlement, I've got it broken out into 6 different steps. I mean, before you can have embezzlement in your dental practice, someone has to be your employee. You have to hire them. So I'm going to talk a little bit about hiring. And then in a typical case, that person's there for a while. They gain familiarity and trust. They earn the doctor's trust. Something happens in their life. They begin to steal. They gain more encouragement and confidence as they begin to steal. And the stealing will stop when they're caught or quit. And then once you have uncovered embezzlement, there's discussions around investigation, restitution, recovery, and possibly criminal conviction. So I'm going to talk about each one of these in a little more detail as we go through. So let's talk about hiring. Now, the majority of dental embezzlers that are caught are first-time offenders who didn't intend to steal when they were first hired. This is somebody who came into your practice very well intended. They don't have a criminal background. They may be, a football mom. They maybe go to the PTA. They're working in the practice for many, many years or several years, and then they begin to steal. Many of them don't go to prison. Many of them get some sort of probative sentencing. Now, unlike those that are the first-time offenders, and that's a typical case. And I'm going to estimate probably about 80 to 90% of dental embezzlers who are caught fit in that profile. They're one-time offenders, and many of them don't go on to reoffend. Now, contrast that to the serial embezzlers. And these are people who have a checkered past. These are people who have a history of dishonesty in dental practices, and now they're looking for a job in your dental practice. And those people will cause pretty much immediate damage as soon as they come through the door. They're going to target you as soon as they figure out what you look at and what you don't look at in your dental practice. Here's an example. Here's Zab Hunter. Now, Zab had a great resume. She was in Southern California. She presented very well during the interview. Now, just to set the stage here, this particular practice, this was just early onset COVID in 2020. And this practice had the office manager left. The dentist had nobody at the front, and Zab shows up. Hi, I can do this work. I know how to process dental claims, tons of experience. She could start right away, which was important. And she was hired by the dentist in September of 2020. Now, a couple of months later, probably around, it was like late November, the practice owner became concerned when several patients came in and began complaining about unusual charges on their credit cards, in so much as one patient said, I've got a charge on my card and I don't use this card anywhere. The last place I used this card was here in your practice. And my credit card company alerted me to fraudulent charges. So the doctor was concerned that he had hired a bad apple, we'll say, and gave me a call. So I'm on the phone with him. What's her name? And I Googled her name. And this came up on a simple Google search. And if you search her name, this will come up. Doctor's office worker stole and forged prescription forms. This is from Raleigh Police. And this is back in September of 2016. Wasn't hard to find. Did a little bit more research. She's got she's got a rap sheet that's fairly long. Conspiracy to obtain false property. Here she is in possession of a stolen vehicle. I believe the vehicle was a Mercedes, may have been an S-Class or a C-Class. Note the date, it's May of 2020, just months before she was hired by this dentist in California. Of course, on the way to California, she decides that she's going to commit other felonies. And here we are from Wakefield, Virginia. And here's a felony warrant out for her by the Wakefield Police as of February 2021. So then I went to the Raleigh, North Carolina Police Department and pulled down her rap sheet. And here you can see all the different mugshots. She's got some interesting eyebrows. I think they're painted on. But the most interesting one here is down in the lower left corner, trafficking in opium and heroin. The other ones are fraud, felony, larceny, simple worthless checks. This is somebody with a checkered past. Now, to keep her out of your dental practice, all you had to do was Google her name. And look what came up. I mean, I didn't use any special powers other than the power of Google to find this information. So now you're asking yourself, like, how does someone like that get hired in a dental practice, right? How does someone with a history, with a checkered past, with a history of dishonesty or financial misconduct get hired by a dental practice in the first place? It's because no one checked the resume. And this is a little bit of a hot topic for dentists and practice owners, because no one, people talk about doing background checks, and when someone comes in your dental practice and they're applying for a job as a receptionist or front desk or office manager, and then the practice comes in and says, okay, we're going to do a full credit check, criminal check. And sometimes that sounds a little bit strong. And oftentimes solo practice owners or independent dentists don't want to take that type of action. They don't want to go down that pathway. They feel it might be a little bit too much, a little oppressive, I guess it would be a word I would use. So there is an alternative, and the alternative is to check a resume like a detective. It's common for people to lie on their resumes, even if they're not people like Zab Hunter, who is a convicted felon and has a rap sheet a mile long. People still lie on their resumes. And this is from an HR site. 60% lie about having a mastery of a skill like Excel. I've hired people who said they knew how to use Excel and they didn't. People will lie about working longer at one company than they did at another, or they'll lie about their achievements or promotions. So you can learn how to check an applicant's resume like a detective if you follow my guide. And at the end of this presentation, you'll get a QR code, or you can go to my website. We'll talk a little bit more about that, where you can get my guide. It's called Pre-Employment Reference Checks, and how you can keep people like Zab Hunter out of your practice. So now here we are. We're talking about a typical case of dental embezzlement. And we're going to keep those serial embezzlers over here onto one side because they're not typical, but they're out there. We're talking about 80% of dental embezzlement is a first-time offender. Now you've hired this person, and guess what? They didn't intend to steal from you from day one. They were earnest. They wanted to impress you, wanted to be a good worker. So what happens? They start to build familiarity and trust in your practice. Take on additional responsibilities, work a little overtime, maybe babysit your kids. They become part of the dental practice and the dental practice family. And not through any malfeasant intent on their own. They become intimately aware of your own personal life. And I'm talking about the practice owner's personal life, and what they do and what they pay attention to, what they don't pay attention to, what happens on Wednesday evening at 4:30 when the kids got to go to football. They know the doctor's life in and out. And so what happens is that they build familiarity and trust in the practice, where they have control and they have the ability to steal, but they're not stealing yet. And during that time, something happens. Something happens that the practice can't control. It's something outside of the practice, and it will be an intense pressure and a rationalization for money. And it could be for debt. It could be for addiction. It could be for gambling. Gambling is predominantly, surprisingly high among embezzlement cases. It could be because of a divorce and a loss of an income. Or it could be because someone wants to have a more lavish lifestyle. They want to have a more pretentious and elevate their lifestyle. Bling, we'll call it. Now, what's interesting is there's a psychologist called Dr. Linda Grounds. She's based out of Oregon, I believe. She's done research on female embezzlers after they've been convicted. These are women who've gone to prison. And she asks why they stole in the first place, and compared that as a gender-based study. And I know gender is a real sort of word today because we've got this, big, long gender story with a whole lot of letters. But she was wondering if there was a difference between male and female, just those two genders of people who would embezzle. And she said that, females will steal for what's called higher loyalties more than men. And it may be that nurturing matriarch type that's sort of innate within many females. And what that means is that for them to justify stealing, they'll do it because I have to keep a relative of mine, a son or a friend, out of jail, bail him out, get him out of trouble all the time. I may have someone, a son or a daughter, and I've had this, 63-year-old woman. She was a grandmother. She was stealing for her son's crack addiction. Their son was like 40. He's 48 years old, living at home in the basement, smoking crack all day.
Right. Bill, I want to share a story with you.
Yeah, please do.
Happened to us as well. Was overseeing a group in Southern California. We had this one employee, longtime employee, did everything right. Nothing was ever askew. And all of a sudden, we had patients calling us about unusual charges. And so as we dug deeper, she was stealing because her son was in jail. Yeah. And when we didn't even know the son was in jail, but it came down to that. So it does happen without us knowing, especially with this one employee who's always done right, and it can change.
It does change. And what was more interesting, well, not more interesting, what was also interesting about Dr. Brown's research is that she found female embezzlers will often steal to stay in an abusive or maintain a relationship. To stay in an abusive relationship or to maintain a relationship that they want to stay in that they otherwise couldn't if they didn't have the money to be able to maintain whatever it is that keeps that relationship together. So it's a higher loyalty, whereas men are just pigs. They'll just steal for themselves and go. Sorry, but right, you can see the difference. So let's talk a little bit about the pressures for what happens in a typical case of dental embezzlement. There's these three things. First of all, there has to be pressure, and we talked about some of the pressures: the higher loyalties, the debt, or why people will steal. They have some financial or emotional force that you can't control. And then there has to be opportunity. But this person's been working in your dental practice for a while, and they know what you look at. They know what you don't look at. They've earned your trust. They know the owner's blind spots, and they have plenty of opportunity because they have care, control, and custody of pretty much the entire practice. And then they have to rationalize it. And it is easy to rationalize stealing from a dental practice. The type of techniques of neutralization that people can tell themselves, I'm not doing a bad thing. I've had, embezzlers will steal for a year. They'll feel really bad. I stole $30,000 from the practice, or $40,000 from the practice over a period of 7 or 8 months. And then they'll say, oh, the doctor's still going on vacation, March break, just got a new car. Wow, that didn't really affect them that much. If the practice is doing well, wow, I deserve it. He didn't miss it, or she didn't miss it. So rationalizing it is really, really easy. So what do you do during that period of time when that person is building the familiarity and trust with your practice, and they're doing it in an earnest and somewhat honest way until something happens in their life to change their circumstance? What can you do as a practice owner? Well, what you can do is what this guy's doing. And I don't mean go out, stand on the corner with a sign, but so if you're driving down the freeway, well, it's not a freeway, but if you're driving down Pothole Alley and you see this guy and with a sign up, what's your first instinct? Right? Your first instinct is he crazy? But your second instinct is, wait a second now.
It breaks.
Maybe over the hill, over the corner, there's a radar trap. So what do? You intuitively put the brakes on. Perception that you're going to get caught and there's going to be a penalty is embedded in your mind. So you behave differently. That's the most powerful fraud deterrent. It's called the perception of detection. If people believe that they were going to be caught, then they won't steal. You don't rob from banks because the chances of getting caught are pretty damn high and the punishment is severe. So that's the perception of detection. Now, you can maintain that in a dental practice, but that has to happen from the owner. That has to happen from the practice owner or the practice manager, whoever's at the top making those decisions and setting the tone within the practice. That's where it has to happen. It has to be set forth in a way that that person illustrates to the rest of the staff. And like if you're a doctor and you're a practice owner, you have to have unimpeachable integrity. You can never come out and at the end of the day take cash from the drawer and say, oh, well, whatever, and put it in your pocket like it's not going to the bank, or do things with insurance where you might want to favor one patient and say, well, we'll charge an extra unit or something on that to get something for that patient. Always display ethical and transparent behavior to all of your staff and let them know that you have your eyes on things. That is the most powerful deterrent. So now they're building the familiarity and trust. They know your practice inside out. Something has happened. They got a divorce. Now their new boyfriend who rides a Harley and got a patch on his back, she wants to steal money. That has happened. That's true. What happens? Well, the first theft is, they're waiting to see if they've gotten caught. And I'm speaking, about a typical case. They're saying, wow, I've just stolen. They're not going to steal the next day. They're not going to steal 3 times in one day. They're going to steal and wait and see what happens. And when nothing happens, they'll do it again. When nothing happens, they'll do it again. And that process will be repeated with ever increasing frequency and amount, quanta, over time until they reach a certain limit. Most embezzlers become really surprised at how easy it is to steal from the practice once they start doing it, because they found a niche, they found that blind spot or 2 blind spots, something that the doctor flies past the doctor's radar screen, and now they're going to start taking money. So the question is, how much money can an embezzler steal? Well, the serial embezzlers are the worst. They'll steal in an acute way, rapid onset, and the losses can be unpredictable. And it really depends on the source of funds and the length of crime. And what I mean by that is if your employee is stealing from your bank account through your accounts payable, or just stealing over-the-counter payments that are coming in for dental services that you've done. Someone who's a chronic embezzler, like a first-time offender, the onset is slower and there are more predictable losses. And, if the person has access to your bank account, your practice bank account, you're going to see increased losses in those instances. And if your employee decides to steal from external sources like insurance companies or financial institutions like banks, opening up lines of credit, or stealing from insurance companies through healthcare fraud, submitting claims for services that weren't done, then the amounts can even be much, much greater. But we're talking about a typical case here. So let's crank back to this estimate. And this is called Hilsa's axiom. And like I said, I've been doing this since 2004, and I've conducted investigations in literally hundreds of dental practices. And what I've observed is that, and this applies to chronic theft. So this is the first time embezzler or someone in your practice has been stealing, and they've been doing it for months or years. They've been doing it for a long time. How much can they steal? And typically you're going to see about 5% of collections. Now, why is it 5% of collections? Well, unless you've got a practice that's a literal cash cow and you've got tons of money coming in over the counter, if you steal more than 5%, the doctor's going to notice it. They're going to probably dip into their line. If you steal 10%, they're probably going to dip into their line of credit. They're probably going to have, some days they're going to have to juggle things around to meet payroll. It really depends. It's idiosyncratic to each practice, but in general, I could steal 5% of a dental practice's revenue and they wouldn't miss it. Right? 5 cents on the dollar. So $1 million practice, you can steal $50,000 a year and it fly under the radar. So that's how we get to these $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 thefts that we see in the news that seem to be somewhat sensational. People like to do it low and slow and steady. And this is an actual case from 2012 to 2019. And what you're looking at here is a 7-year period. And this is the percentage of revenue that was stolen in each year. And you can see it plateaued up, went up to 4.88%. And then in the final year, the practice owner's spidey sense started going off, and she started to confront the employee, make offhand remarks about we're not doing as well. And it went down to 3.96%. Now on $1 million practice, 1% is 10 grand. A $2 million practice, 1% is $20,000, which when you look at an employee's salary over an annual basis, an extra $10,000 or $20,000 a year is a significant increase in lifestyle for someone who's, making whatever their base rate is. So let's talk about the most common schemes. Again, when you look in the news, you'll see these people, they sound like they're Bertie Madoff, or Al Capone, and they've got, these big schemes. Yes, that's true. Those people exist. They're the people who can figure their way out of anything, and they'll invoke complex schemes, set up phony lines of credit, phony companies, phony employees, all of that stuff. But we're talking about the most common cases of a dental embezzlement. So what are they? Theft of cash. Cash is tempting. It's easy to conceal, and sometimes it's hard to trace, and it's also inducible. Now, what I mean when I say inducible, I had a case where the employee would phone patients in advance and tell them to bring cash into their dental appointment because the credit card machine was down and they couldn't accept checks and so on. So people would bring cash, and she left this message on a number of machines, and finally the practice owner, a patient came in. I don't know why it's blurred. Anyway, a patient came in and said, "Look what was on my answering machine," and produced it to the practice owner. And here was the employee saying, "Bring in cash." Check tampering, that's stealing company checks or stealing insurance checks for work that was done by the doctor. Payroll schemes are common. If you allow employees, as opposed to a payroll service, to do your payroll, they'll pad their hours, they'll add on extra hours. They may even do overpayments or create phony employees. Phony refunds, either by check or by credit card, going through and taking refund amounts that you think are going to insurance companies or patients, but they're not. Healthcare fraud is common, and it's a big one, but here's the difference. What they're doing now is they're stealing, and when I say they, I mean the people who are stealing from insurance companies for work that you did not do. So they're submitting false claims for friends, for family members, for patients, or even people that they don't know, having those proceeds come into the practice and then taking the insurance checks and literally just cashing them. Very easy thing to do, as we'll see soon. And expense padding. So this is when you let someone say, someone's in charge of ordering. True case, and I made a post on my blog. In 1 year, an office manager bought, I forget, it was an incredible amount of stuff on Amazon. The practice ordered everything on Amazon for the practice, had an Amazon account. She would order stuff on Amazon and have it sent to her home address, which is so easy because Amazon says, where do you want this to go? You want home or where? And clicked her home address, had the stuff go to her home address. And it was tens of thousands of dollars, candle making supplies, which she used for an online candle making business and sold all her scented candles online for money that she stole from the doctor.
I know we had this in an office that I worked at, Bill. We have expense padding. The office manager ended up had the company credit card to, pay the rep, the company's sale for products, and ended up buying professional basketball and football tickets. And if it had not been for the doctor to check his credit card statement, he would have never known that he was funding her life. So
had that done with the doctor's credit card used for plastic surgery. And in one case, a long time ago, and I don't have the slides here, I found an invoice for it. It was called Night Magic Fashions, which is an adult store, an adult toy store, with the lingerie, all that stuff. $800. And some of I didn't recognize some of the things on the credit card statement. And she stole a laptop computer and all kinds of stuff. But we see that. But these are the most common schemes: cash, taking checks, payroll, phony refunds, and so on.
And Bill, I would like to mention this again, is that, what you said is setting the tone, right? Mm-hmm. I think that if a new employee comes in, it would be great to see that there are checks and balances, and there are processes and protocols. Let's say end of day, this is, and you may have to have two signatures to, verify that the deposit and the cash and the insurance checks or payments from the patient, does compare and reconcile. So again, I think what you had mentioned about setting the tone is so true. If it's like one of those things where, the provider doesn't say anything like, okay, this is how we do deposits end of day. I'm going to be looking at the credit card sheet, or I want you to go ahead and enter these purchases onto this spreadsheet, if you will, so that we can compare, making sure that, the credit cards and the purchases are aligning. Once again, if you don't set the tone, these things can happen.
A personal friend of mine who was my dentist when I was back in university, used to take the day sheets home every day, the printout of the payments and collections and the appointment sheet for tomorrow. Said, well, at the practice, the computers aren't working tomorrow morning. I've got tomorrow's schedule here with the phone numbers. That was all he was concerned about. But he'd take those day sheets home, and every so often, every third month or second month, he'd go in and this was his process. He would pull out a day sheet randomly, go into staff and put the day sheet on the desk. You can tell I went to university a while ago because they had to pull charts, right? Right. It was the paper charts. And he'd say, pull all these charts. It was like 30 or 40 charts. Pull these charts and put them on my desk. And then he'd go in at the end of the day. Now, this is what happened 3 months ago. And then he would randomly pick 5 or 6 of these, take a half an hour, 20 minutes, and open them up and make sure that the work that was in the chart was recorded in the ledger and so on, right? A simple check. But what do you think his staff said behind his back? What they said was, basically, you can never pull the wool over this guy's eyes, for God's sake, blah, blah, blah. He brings in stuff 3 months old, asking us to pull charts so he can go in and check. They thought they couldn't. And true enough, right? So it was a real powerful perception of detection. So these are the most common schemes. So let's talk about some of these schemes in a little bit more detail. And there's a blog post, and it's going to be in the QR code that you get at the end here, where you can go and you can look about safekeeping insurance checks. And these are the checks that come in the mail. I know checks are like, they should be gone the way of CDs by now and cassette tapes, but they're not. They're still here, but they're going to go away. But until then, you need to make sure that they're safe. Just listen to this story here.
New at 5. Police are looking for an office manager suspected of embezzling hundreds of thousands of dollars from her boss. The victim is a prominent Buckhead dentist. New at 5, live in Cobb County, Channel 2's consumer investigator Jim Strickland found a major bank is accused of allowing the thefts to go on for years. Jim?
Sure, Vita, we'll talk about this first. There's a warrant out for 40-year-old Erica Cameron. The dentist who employed her for more than 10 years figures he'll never get his money out of her, but he believes that Wells Fargo ought to pay up. In this lawsuit, He alleges that the bank's ATMs were a key to the theft.
And they're tying up everything with the legal system and trying to smother me.
Dr. Bob File walked me through reams of paper documenting the case of office manager Erica Cameron and the bank Cameron and File both used, Wells Fargo.
When she was caught red-handed by Wells Fargo Bank, calling me and telling me that she had been depositing checks made out to my business into her personal account.
File says he was busy as a clinician while he had Cameron handle the office. How much money are they sure is missing?
North of $630,000, and then she just went to the ATM and deposited it into the ATM.
These are 5 of the more than 500 checks File says Cameron fed to Wells Fargo ATMs. This one's nearly $2,500. The endorsement is for deposit into File's account, but File says Cameron signed it and deposited it into her account. File complains a human teller would have questioned the transactions, but they sailed through via automation. We went looking for Cameron at her last known address. Hello, Miss Cameron? No answer.
She ended up walking out of the office before the police came, so she hasn't been caught.
That's the picture of a man who looks betrayed. You know, how heartbreaking, $630,000. And then to spend money taking a financial institution, taking a financial institution to court and launching a claim to get restitution from them. And so you may be asking yourself, how could Erica Cameron deposit checks into an ATM for so many years without being caught? And the answer is automated check clearing. Now, you recall in that story, it was Wells Fargo that notified Dr. File what was happening. So this had to be particularly egregious. And I mean, for her to steal $630,000, this was going on for 5-6 years at least. And the reason that she could do that is because it went through machines like this. This is a little older one, but they're still out there. They're optical scanners. And the optical scanners will look at the codes on the check. They'll make sure that the check is formatted for the optical scanner. And the only reason that the check is going to get kicked out for a human being to look at is if the check is not formatted such that the optical scanner can read it properly. Well, guess what? Delta Dental, Aetna, Met, all the checks are properly formatted for optical scanning. Or if the check is NSF. Well, you know, I've yet to see, maybe it happens, Delta's going to have an NSF check once or twice, but I've never seen it, right? So they just sail through the automated clearing system. And so you may ask yourself, why wasn't Wells Fargo liable to repay? I mean, they went to the doctor and said, hey, your employee's taking your checks and putting them into her account through the automated teller. And it has to do with Article 4, the Uniform Commercial Code, which regulates banking activities. And there's a concept of shared negligence. And that's why your banks say to you in your statement, you know, you have 30 days or 60 days to notify us of anything that you see here that you don't like or you think is not right. And so you can imagine the bank's position. I mean, Dr. File's position is, wait now, those checks were stamped with my name, deposit to my check account, and went over to Wells Fargo. But that's not the bank. I want my money back. And the bank is saying, well, you know what? This went on for quite some period of time, $630,000 worth of checks. I mean, shouldn't you have had some oversight on your own business affairs for it to have gone on so long? So it's shared negligence, contributory negligence. And the other thing too about taking banks to court, you want to sue somebody in civil court, there's an old phrase that lawyers will say, you know, make sure you have deep pockets, deeper pockets than the person you want to sue. And you can't outspend Wells Fargo, no matter how well you do in dentistry. So now we've got this person who's been stealing using one of those common schemes that we talked about. And you say, well, when does the embezzlement stop? When is it going to stop? And it's only going to stop under a couple of conditions. They're either going to get caught or they're going to quit. If they get caught, hopefully you'll fire them, or they're going to quit themselves voluntarily. They'll walk out. Now, oftentimes when people believe that they're going to get caught, and for some reason, you know, they feel really anxious that the practice owners is going to catch them, they're going to quit, and they quit suddenly. It's unexpected and possibly dramatic, and no reason given. Oftentimes, if a long-term employee who maybe the practice owner's intuition or spidey sense was tingling a little bit, and that employee quits suddenly with no reason, almost invariably you were going to find financial misconduct or some type of gross negligence that's on the go. Anyway, and the other one is, or the doctor will find the employee, they'll know that the employee's stealing, and they'll just let that employee go. And what I mean by that is, I've had doctors who've called me for advice. Too many have called and said, I think my employee's stealing, my office manager's stealing. I go through triage, tell me some more, ask a few questions, and pretty soon I'm coming to a fairly reasonable conclusion that this person's suspicions are likely well-founded, and to be able to prove what they're saying would be a relatively easy task. Go look at something at a bank record, or go find this document, and you'd be able to prove. And what their solution is, yeah, I'm just going to let that person go. Now, dental offices are intimate environments and very close in terms of the relationships that can form between doctors and assistants, doctors and staff. Oftentimes doctors may say, I don't want to do anything because they know my kids, they're in the same school, the same PTA, all kinds of reasons why. Friends of the family, been over at Christmas, don't want to rock the boat, just want to move on, I'm going to let you go. Well, the problem with doing that is, and not doing it in the right way, and oftentimes practice owners will say, I'm just going to let her go because I don't want to involve police and lawyers. And I think you're jumping way too many steps down the road at that thought process. The thought process, when you have someone in your practice and you know that they've been stealing and you want to let them go, is to let them go in a way that any future events that you wish to pursue or any type of legal challenge that may come forward because of that employee's actions, that you're well protected. So letting someone go for no cause sets a really bad example. The rest of your staff already know this person may have been stealing, and they're just like, oh, well, the doctor just let her go. Your employee is likely going to be hired by another office, and sometimes you can be sued for wrongful termination. Now, if you have an employee in your practice and they either quit suddenly or you let them go, and your spidey sense was tingling that they may have been stealing, and now patients start to complain in the absence of that employee's presence in your practice, start complaining about their account statements. Why do I have to pay for this? I didn't have to pay last time. That's not the amount. Or I don't owe any money. I've already paid. That's a red flag. And those things need to be investigated. Because likely it was the reason that patients weren't complaining was because that employee was there to control the situation. And the most unfavorable outcome is after your employee leaves, or you let them go, or they suddenly quit, insurance companies start calling and asking questions about claim submissions, and you don't have any answers. You can't find the answers because these were fraudulent claims that were submitted. There's a post on my blog called Confronting a Dishonest Employee, and you can learn more if you go read that post. It's an expanded dialogue on how to do that. If you have an employee that you suspect is dishonest, how you can confront them in your practice as a practice owner. So now you've caught the person. They've either quit or you've caught them and you've fired them. And let's assume now that you want to get restitution. And now there's an audit part in the middle here that I didn't talk about. That's sort of the job that I do. But now you count the beans, you find out how much was stolen. Let's say you do that and you find out that it's not an insignificant amount. You say, I want my money back. I want restitution. How can I get restitution as a practice owner? Well, 40% of practice owners are going to get nothing. And generally how restitution works is that the most certain source of funds for recovery is employee dishonesty insurance. And while this can be obtained as a second policy, it is normally included in a bundle of business owner policies called a business owner policy. So it's a bundle of services, and it's generally under what's called crime insurance. So if you have things like TDIC or Hanover, or there's a whole bunch of other ones, most of these business owner policies, and this is the same policy that's for your slip and fall, for patients, or if your building burns down or you get a flood, that's where you're going to find your employee dishonesty. Most practice owners probably aren't even aware that they have some level of coverage, and they're probably not aware that there's various types of coverage for employee dishonesty. Most of the policies that I've seen will vary between $5,000 and $100,000 in coverage. Now, the 100,000 is not usually by default. The practice owner has to go and ask for that coverage. Most policies that have this form of coverage will probably have between 10 and 25,000. That seems to be the nominal amount for most insurance companies, but you can have that increase. And I do suggest that when you renew your policy as a practice owner, that you seek to have that coverage increased. And if you don't have that coverage, then get a business owner policy that does include employee dishonesty. With that, there are also things called an endorsement or a claim expense endorsement. And what that is it's an added feature in insurance policies to pay for auditing expenses. So this type of coverage is not like fire coverage, where proof of loss is there was a building here yesterday and now there's a pile of ashes. Sure, the building's burned, there's a loss. A financial crime is different and usually requires an audit report to present with your claim for losses. Some policies will have a claim endorsement, usually around $10,000, to help offset or pay for any auditing fees that the practice owner will incur. The other place that you'll often get an immediate offer of recovery is from the perpetrator. Now, it's rare that this will happen, and they often do it on bended knee, and it's often a well-intended offer. But if you have an employee who says, please don't call the cops, I'll do anything, then you need to contact a professional. You need to contact an attorney about how you're going to do this. If they make an offer of restitution, remember now you're entering into an agreement for repayment, which is going to really absolve probably any type of criminal or any type of civil claim that you might have down the road. Because you're entering into that agreement. So it has to be done properly. I've had these things backfire, and I've had these things go relatively well. The best case was when the employee had $140,000 in 401k and collapsed the 401k voluntarily. That was the important part of this, is that they had to collapse it voluntarily without any type of coercion or external force. Anyway, that was all handled by the attorneys, and the client got back, $140,000 or $160,000, which was still less than half of what was stolen. Then there are civil remedies. I want to sue that person. Well, my grandmother used to say you can't get blood out of a turnip, and you can't. So often cases, these perpetrators don't have the money to repay. But not in all cases. Some will have land. They may get an inheritance. Their father dies and leaves them 100 acres. That happened. And they come into money. So you can sue somebody if they have the assets to do so, but there are cost-benefit limitations. To sue somebody costs money. You need an expert witness, the type of services that I provide. You need a litigation lawyer who's going to take that and go into court and argue and litigate that case. And that costs money. So there's a return of benefits. You'll spend $1 if you can recover $2. You may spend $1.50 if you can recover $2, as long as there's a positive outcome. But you don't want to spend $80,000 in legal fees and have no recoveries. And it really is subject to the perpetrator's ability to repay. So civil remedies are, in a typical case of dental embezzlement, often not considered. There's my little slide. Make sure to check your practice dishonesty insurance. And now criminal conviction. And all the news articles that you see online, these are people who have been charged in the public domain. Those are only the tip of the iceberg, the ones who are criminally convicted. Many make plea deals to stay out of prison, first-time offenders. They go on gambling counseling. When you see someone get sentenced to 3 years or 10 years for embezzlement, it's not their first rodeo. They've been caught before. And judges are looking at this and saying, you need to learn a lesson. And the thing about a criminal conviction that I get asked, and again, this is jumping to the end game. I've got doctors who'll call me and say, well, can you prove it? I'm saying, well, who do you want it proven to? The burden of proof, right? I don't know if I'm old enough to remember OJ in the glove, right? And so it's got to be beyond a reasonable doubt, right? And that's the highest burden of proof in any court. And the answer is, can you prove it? It depends. It really does depend. It's idiosyncratic to the case and on-site specifics. But if the evidence will support it, if someone's stealing checks, insurance checks, or stealing credit cards, something that can be traced through a financial system, your chances of a successful criminal prosecution go up. And again, it may not end up in incarceration. It may just mean that this person gets a felony record, which, in some cases, if they've done this before. Okay, so I'm going to switch gears completely now, and I'm going to we've talked about the typical case, front to back, how much people can steal, the common schemes, and now I want to talk about the clues that dentists can look for in their own practice when they think, or to give them an early warning that something may be wrong. And this guy, Kurt Lewin, came up with this equation for human behavior. He said behavior is a function of the person and their environment. And it makes sense. If someone is in a bad environment, they may behave poorly. If you're under stress and duress, you're going to behave a different way. I mean, it's kind of intuitive. But really what it boils down to is that this is the embezzler's dilemma. If they tell a lie, it becomes part of their future. So the concealment game becomes part of the embezzler's day-to-day playbook. I've taken from you, I have to conceal it. And now I'm going to change my behavior if you become suspicious, if you start asking questions, right? And how that comes out is it's a red flag. Now, a red flag of fraud doesn't mean that fraud is there. It's just a red flag. It may be present, doesn't guarantee it's there, and it could be something innocent. And I've had many cases, where red flags turned out to be something quite innocent, but they can also point to something a lot more sinister. Now, the rule is you never ignore a red flag. And I'm going to give participants here, they can go online and look at the 26 red flags that I have.
Right, Bill, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I just have to share this experience of a red flag. This happened again in my group practice, if you will, and we actually conducted background checks. And this woman, front desk, we needed, a biller, and the doctor in this location was, like, we need to hire her, even though this person did not pass the background check. And we said, we can't hire her. There was like red flags, right? But he was insistent, high producing office, needed a biller like ASAP. So guess what? We bent the rules, and sure enough, she started stealing by getting credit card information, patient credit cards information. We didn't know this until the cops showed up. So
Yeah.
I mean, if the background check came back, don't hire. But once again, I mean, it's like what you said, doing a complete, resume check, if you will. I'm gonna tell you, I mean, it was not a good thing. So don't put yourself in that position, is what I'm trying to say to the attendees.
Though, is that, as you said, Bill, creating this environment of, the perception of detection. If you're noticing red flags, yeah, it might not be a guarantee that someone's doing something wrong. But if that thought starts crossing someone's mind, I think that should be the catalyst to say, maybe I should put a few safety nets in place so that I have a little bit more oversight, or so that I don't ever feel maybe blindsided like this again. I mean, that to me would pique my interest in saying, am I really looking as closely at things as I should be, just to stay on top?
Well, that's a good point. And I'll illustrate that here in the types of red flags that I'm talking about. First, there's behavioral red flags. And these are the ones that I'm going to say that dentists are most apt to be able to detect. It's someone's behavior changes. You'll notice those things. And I'm going to give you a list of the top behavioral red flags to look for in just a moment. Then there's also the statistical red flags. AR is up, adjustments are up, deletions are up. That's more in the realm of accountants or practice managers or people who look at numbers. And since doctors are looking at teeth most all day long and don't look at numbers when they get off work, the statistical red flags are usually only brought to their attention by someone they trust who is looking at those, like the reports and the software and so on. But again, the behavioral red flags are the ones that are the easiest for dentists to use. And then there's the organizational red flags. If you're the type of business owner, I'm not going to say a practice owner, if you're a type of business owner that's unethical and you'll cut corners and you'll do things, that sends a poor message to your employees that it's okay to do the same. So again, this is tone at the top, that unimpeachable integrity by the practice owner, tone at the top. If you have that, you will not have any what are called organizational red flags. Let's talk about the top 6 red flags. 85% of dental embezzlement cases had one or more of these 6 flags. First one is lifestyle. And this is someone's lifestyle is inconsistent with their pay. Now, if you see someone, I mean, I'm going to give you the gross example, the office manager drives in with a nicer and newer BMW than the owner. That's a red flag. But when you see people taking vacations, buying things, and it will accumulate over time, and you'll say, well, how can they afford that? How can they afford that vacation? They're always going here. It may be because they have an extra source of funds. Now, maybe a rich relative died, or they won a lottery, or something happened. But when someone has good fortune and they get money unexpectedly, what's the first thing they do to all their coworkers? brag, I won the lottery. You know, Uncle Joe died and left me money. So it becomes visible. When someone's stealing, it's invisible. And it's a sense they want to have pretentiousness. They want to have extra merchandise. That's the number one red flag. In fact, 49% or 40%, I'm sorry, of embezzlement cases, lifestyle beyond income was observable. The next one is money problems. Now, money problems are idiosyncratic. Your money problems are different than my money problems and somebody else's money problems. And if you ask anybody, no matter how much money they got, they say, I got money problems, right? But again, people will steal if they perceive that they have money problems. And it might not be, the common example is a lot of people say, well, you know, can't pay my mortgage, can't pay my gas bill, my power is going to get cut off. Maybe it's not that, you know, maybe I need that $300 for that new Louis Vuitton bag. That's the money problem. So the money problem is driven by whatever the motivation is. Irritability and suspiciousness in the workplace. And this is somebody when you walk into the room, they hang up the phone, they close the computer screen. You may ask them a question, they'll deflect. If you ask a question, they'll come up with an alternate scenario. If you come in and say, well, you know, and you'll explain something, could be even a financial transaction, whatever you're talking about, normal course of business, you're having a conversation with that employee, and then they come back after you've questioned them, they come back with something that's plausible, but just seems like, wow, that was really an alternate explanation. That's a red flag. People are irritable, suspiciousness at work. The other one is control issues, unwillingness to share duties, don't want anybody else involved, don't want practice advisors coming in, don't want consultants, don't want new banks, don't want to upgrade software, don't want to switch software, all the don'ts. I control the practice, all of that stuff. Don't get external billers, don't do this. That's just not going to work for me. And, you know, it's going to cause me problems. And oftentimes the dentist will kowtow to that, and they'll do that if the employee is a controlling type personality. Part of this is that they'll set work aside pre-absentia. So they got knee surgery, and what they'll do is they'll come into practice and work and do all their work, and then they'll go for knee surgery. And while they're gone, whoever's filling in, they'll give explicit instructions. Do this, but don't do that. When this comes in, put it there. And they do all their work. Even if they're going out just for the afternoon for lunch, they'll say, don't touch that pile of work there. I'll do it when I get back. So they control because they have to conceal. Divorce is high among red flags, particularly people who have the enjoyment of 2 middle-class incomes. And now one of them is gone. And if the divorce is contentious and there is disputes and there are lawyers that can place hardship and financial stress, ask anybody who's been through it, on a family. And in some cases, divorce and other family problems, which could be supporting 2 relationships and so on, is a red flag. And the last one is someone who's a wheeler dealer attitude. And that's someone who would ingratiate themselves with people for their own gain. And you can almost palpate individuals like that. You see, that person just seems, just too good to be true. These are the top 6 red flags. Now, if you go online and with the QR code, I have an assessment online that has some of the statistical red flags and others behavioral red flags. There's about 26 or 28 questions. It's free, it's confidential, and it's anonymous. I don't keep your score. I don't even ask your name. I don't even ask for your email address. You can go there and you do this for your own benefit as a practice manager or as a practice owner, and observe those red flags. And if you see a red flag, make sure that you try and find a reasonable explanation why it is there. And some of the explanations are noted in the assessment that's online. So let's wrap things up. We're almost at the end. What do you do to protect yourself as a practice owner? First of all, unimpeachable integrity. Create and cultivate that perception of detection. There's articles on my website about how to do that and what you should do. Number 2, hire smart. Keep the people with a bad past out of your practice and get the good people with a good past into your practice, and then observe and monitor for the red flags. Now, again, you've got to run a business with best business processes, and use your software and check your reports and run all your stuff and keep your eye on your AR. That's normal best business practice. On top of that, you're going to be looking for these red flags, and the behavioral red flags. Again, I'll just comment on this. They are the easiest to use because the close proximity of a dental office allows people to overhear things that are easy to overhear. And, you may overhear a staff member talking to somebody at the front. One doctor called me and he said, a patient came in and complained and said that they paid in cash and that their bill didn't say the cash payment, said something else. And the person at the front desk was arguing with the patient that they would fix it. And the practice owner overheard that. That's a red flag. You've got to check those things out. And so there's the QR code. If you can scan it or play it back and have a look at it. And here we are at the end. Whoops. And mic drop. And any questions? I have to take a break. I'm going to be back in 30 seconds. So if there's any questions, please put them on hold. I'll let you guys take over until then. Okay, hang on.
Great.
Well, we've learned a lot. I mean, there's a lot of things that I can say are pearls of wisdom taken from this webinar as it is. I know that it's a popular topic, but also an uncomfortable one. Ashley, Jackie, thoughts?
For sure. I've worked in a couple practices where this has been a big thing. And, I don't know the outcome of the employees. Obviously, I know they were terminated, but I don't know the outcome of what happened. But it's scary to think that this can go for long periods of time, especially that Erica. I'm going to ask Bill when he comes back to find out if he knows anything about her. But for that to have gone on for that many years, it's pretty scary.
Right. That example of that one employee that I told you that was like a long-term employee was always great, was in charge of accounts. I mean, like one of our longtime excellent employees started to come to work looking disheveled, looking worried. And, we didn't find out that she was taking monies from, once again, patients' credit cards. I think that it was her way of kind of slipping it underneath the radar until it was brought to our attention. So, and that's when we found out her son was in jail. She's trying to, help him, that type of thing. So from what Bill said, red flags, like she was always, polished, on time, and all of a sudden coming to work stressed, disheveled. We didn't pick up on those red flags. We just thought that maybe she was, stressed, something of that nature. Jackie?
I think especially when these are team members, especially for the ones where people have worked there a long time, it does become kind of like a family. And you trust each other. And, I think in most of the cases we've heard as examples, these are people that are trusted team members. They've been with the practice for enough time that it feels comfortable with them. And I think the default is you want to give people the benefit of the doubt. You might see red flags, but you brush them off thinking, oh, it's something else, something personal in their life. And, they'd never do anything to me. And my biggest takeaway, I think, is just realizing that your best protection is to be proactive and just put some safety nets up in place and to do your due diligence, because it's your business, whether you're the owner or you're the one responsible for making sure no one else is doing things like this. And, just create a culture of honesty, and accountability. I think that that's also another message that can be put out there, even subliminally. And I think those things can be enough of a deterrent most times that you should, hopefully I'd hope someone would be lucky enough that that's enough.
Right.
But this has definitely been a really interesting topic. It's uncomfortable to think this might happen to me, or is it happening? You never want to think that, but.
What would you say, Bill? 60% of offices?
Well, I would say, yeah, maybe 60. I would say probably even more than 60%. And almost every dental office has some level of theft, whether it's a case of toothbrushes gone out the door to be given away somewhere, or, people coming in. I mean, and night white kits and whitening gel. I mean, had one practice, he bought, I think it was like 100 Oral-B Professional, the $150 electronic toothbrushes, bought those for his practice. At the end of the year, I went in and was doing an examination and found out that he had only sold like 4 or 5, but there was none in inventory.
Yeah.
Everybody, guess what? Everybody in the office manager's family, guess what they got for Christmas?
Obi.
Yeah, everybody, right? Yeah. And the thing you said about about giving someone a second chance, dentists, and I'm not speaking pejoratively here, because I think if there's any dentists in the audience listening right now, they'll nod their heads in self-reflection when I'm going to say this. But, dentistry is a tough profession. And for the most part, when you first meet somebody the first time as a patient, the first thing they say, most, probably half, say, I fear you. I don't like dentists. I don't want to be here. And you're going to cost me you're going to charge me a lot of money. So they already have that confrontation at work every day, every single day. So when you have that much confrontation, even though it is part of the day-to-day and it's The dental anxiety is confrontation. When you have that, you have to, it creates a different culture. You have to always see the benefit for others. It's called veracity or a lack of self-interest. And dentists want to avoid that confrontation. Nobody wants to confront an employee. And because of that, here's my point. Practice owners will give an employee not a first chance, but a second chance and a third chance and a fourth chance until likely someone else in their family or their trusted circle intervenes and says, you've given them enough chances, and that's because, they're nice people and we always want to see the best in others. But if you look at the world through rose-colored glasses, every red flag looks like a regular flag. And so don't do that.
Bill, do you happen to know what happened to Erica from the commercial?
No, I got a call a while ago, someone asking that same question who was associated or closely related to that particular case, and had said, I don't believe, I've searched the court records. I haven't found her. Zab Hunter, remember I said she was wanted by Wakefield police?
Right.
I'm doing my civic duty. I call Wakefield police. I get just a note taker. I said, I'm calling. They had an 800 number. I called. I said, hey, you're looking for this, got a warrant. Here's the last known address. Here you go. Probably about 2 months later, I get a call from a police officer. And all he wanted was, did you make the call? Where'd you get the information? Did you confirm it? And I could hear him typing in the keyboard. And I said, yep. He said, thank you very much. And that was it. So, they're interested in putting this information in, but the Wakefield police aren't going to go to California and arrest Zab Hunter. Right? They got shootings to deal with, and they got, violent. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So, and unfortunately, the public opinion is, the dentist was stolen $300,000.
That's just really sad, but it is the truth. So we're 3 minutes over because it's, once again, we knew this is going to be a very popular topic, if you will. I know that you have a Facebook page, correct?
There's a Facebook group called Dental Fraud Busters. It's for dentists and practice owners, trusted consultants and advisors. I generally try to restrict employees from joining, just because, dentists, it's a private group. But you're welcome to apply. There's some questions that are asked. And you can, go ahead.
And then once again, they can go into your website, your blog, and get a lot of information. And can we just go back to the QR code for those that didn't get it? I mean, it'd be great for them to just one more time.
Yeah, there's a QR code there. Yeah, or just go to Dental Fraud Busters and go contact Bill, send me an email. I'll get it to you. There's other things too, like fraud policies and stuff that I make available online. And certainly make it available.
So, okay, everyone, that concludes our 12th series of Dinner with the Practice Heroes. I just want to say, we hope you all enjoyed tonight's webinar. I want to say a huge thank you to Bill, Ashley, Jackie. Once again, Bill, thank you for sharing your wisdom and all the information. Like I said, I think we all got a lot of takeaways from this. I would also like to announce that Dinner with Practice Heroes and From the Ground Up is converging into one coming down the pipeline. We will be holding CE events co-branded by CareStack and Darby, so look out for that special announcement. And once again, Bill, thank you. I'm sure we're going to see you again.
Got it.
All right.
Bill.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.